A castle sits in the sun under a Campbell House plaque. Moon, a middle-aged man killed by a car, wakes up inside it. The room is a Western palace of carved wood. In the mirror, he finds his own teenage face. He grabs his hair and screams. Moon lifts a knife to test it all. The blade opens his finger and the pain is real. He rolls around howling that he truly traveled. Moon remembers the exile waiting for this body. That noble ends in rags among empty bottles. He woke up as the yellow-haired villain of a novel. He read that novel on his phone nightly. The villain bullies the heroine with family money. Moon hugs his knees because that fate is his now. He cries that he wanted the protagonist slot. A knock hits the bedroom door. The visitor is Anne, the maid of the house. She brings the dress for tomorrow's banquet. Anne asks about the cut on his hand. Then she licks the blood off her finger. Moon screams with his eyes bulging. Anne tells him to stop hurting himself. He promises to remember that. Moon covers his cheeks with heart eyes. Moon digs up the trigger. The villain drugged the third princess. He grins because avoiding the heroine now looks easy. Anne already delivered the dress for it. It happens tomorrow, and he has no plan. His scream rips across the mansion roof. Moon begs any system out there to answer. He decides to kowtow to the heroine. A hard object cracks him on the head. A small dark book lies on the sheets. Moon grabs it and screams that his cheat arrived. Two hands lift a heavy black book with a purple star burned into the cover. Moon, our blonde villain, is sobbing with joy. Heaven finally handed him a cheat. He sits on the bed and swears he will rewrite the ending fate picked for him. Then he opens the cover and his whole face goes flat. Moon hugs the book and stares. A heavenly artifact with no words in it. Every page is blank. The paper glows gold and says absolutely nothing. He sits cross-legged with it, chewing a finger, hunting for an activation trick. Then he touches the cut on his cheek. Western fantasy worlds usually run on blood. One red drop falls onto the empty page and spreads into a little pool. Purple smoke crawls out of the paper while Moon leans back, eyes wide open. The book detonates. He screams and asks what is happening to him. Ribbons of blood tear out of his arms and pour straight into the pages. His eye goes huge behind his wrists. The thing is draining him. A limp hand lies on wooden boards with an iron cuff locked around the wrist. Two bare feet rest on those same boards, bruised and shackled. Moon hangs against a plank wall, shirtless and covered in fresh welts. One blue eye cracks open in the dark, barely able to focus. He slurs out a question about where this place even is. A face leans in beside him, red eyes and a soft smile. His captor waited a long time for this. The captor presses into his ribs and Moon jerks. Pain is how he learns, apparently. A hand strokes down his bruised chest while that voice calls him evil and selfish. Moon manages a laugh. He is supposed to hurt everyone until only the captor is left. The captor smiles in the dark with those red eyes fixed on him. A blade catches the light. Even death will not separate the two of them. Moon screams no while the chains hold his arms wide open. He rips himself awake in bed, still yelling at the ceiling. Moon sits there panting, soaked, asking out loud what that was. His hand covers his forehead. He wants this to be a dream. Moon pinches his own thigh and still feels it, so the dream reads as a warning. The book goes back into his hands. Maybe that tragedy comes from a mistake he makes, and the thing is about to answer him. He jolts and shouts. The cover is moving in his hands on its own. Red letters burn through purple smoke. Do not change for fate. Black tendrils wrap his waist and pin him down on the mattress. One tendril slides past his eye. The warning is aimed at anyone touching the original plot. Outside the window, the sky turns orange and the curtains drift in the light. Moon stands at that window and asks if survival means walking into his own ruin. Then he perks up. The original ending left the villain alive, just broke and exiled. He grabs his own shoulder and grins. If the family falls, he can rebuild abroad with modern knowledge. Noble status is only a privileged class squeezing the workers, so he can drop it. Dinner arrives and Moon saws into steak he could never afford in his old life. He melts over the whole spread. That evil privileged class eats extremely well. Noyce, his mother, notices that little Moon looks unusually cheerful tonight. Ron, his father, says the boy is excited for tomorrow's coming-of-age banquet. Moon smiles with his eyes shut and tells them both he cannot wait for it. His parents argue happily over how many noble girls will chase him at the party. His mother sulks that Celicia, his fiancée, is far too cold to deserve him. Moon keeps grinning and quietly asks how confident these two really are. Celicia holds a spear in the sunlight, the third princess and the Empire's favorite beauty. Moon looks down and calls himself a rotten fish beside her. Only his parents see a treasure. The pair laugh at the table. In the original story, their own son gets them killed. Moon stands behind their chairs and watches the backs of their heads. He walks toward the bright doorway, done taking orders from a cursed book. The blonde villain will fight to survive anyway. The banquet is tomorrow, and that book already showed him the price of changing fate. The sun comes up over the Grand Duke's castle, and Moon is already scheming. He cannot dodge the coming-of-age ceremony, so he plans to drug the princess instead. He remembers a black market that sells contraband, and a maid rounds the corner with a tea tray. The tray goes flying, and the small maid lands on the carpet in a puddle of tea. Moon says sorry for not watching where he walked, and the girl turns around in horror. She stammers out his name because Moon is the young master of this house. The maid drops to her knees and promises to wipe the spill up right away. She grabs her head and begs him not to punish her or throw her onto the street. One ruined cup terrifies her, and Moon sees exactly how feared the old owner was. He waves the punishment away, pulls her upright, and notices her hand burning hot. Her eyes go wide, and her whole face turns pink at the contact. Moon leans in, presses his forehead to hers, and confirms the fever. She explains that the banquet tomorrow left the staff short, so she kept working sick. A dark-haired maid steps into the hall, and Moon greets her as Anne, a senior maid. He takes the sick girl's hand and asks her name, and she answers with Noel. Anne warns that letting Noel rest dumps the extra work on every other maid. Moon orders all ailing servants to rest and tells her to hire outsiders for the gaps. Anne bows and agrees to carry the order straight to the head maid. Moon walks off down the corridor while the two maids watch him go. Noel points out that the master always banned outside hires, and Anne tells her to drop it. Anne watches Noel leave and decides the young master changed, so she moves her plan up. Whatever that plan is, Moon has no clue it exists. Necklaces and rings lie scattered across the floor of his room. Moon dives headfirst into a treasure chest and digs through the junk. The princess sleeps in her bed, while Moon hunts a potion strong enough to drop a mage. He pops up grinning, because the villain he replaced already owned the hard part. The card in his glove is a VIP pass for the underground black market. Night falls, and a carriage rolls out through the city gate. Moon stops at the Chesford Merchant Guild, claiming he needs jewelry for his parents. He steps down by the lanterns and tugs his collar straight. He slips into a back alley packed with hooded strangers. His borrowed memories point to the sewers under Bellin City. Moon walks the wet tunnels in a gray cloak with a torch in one hand. A voice barks at him from a door ahead, and he answers that he is only a sewer rat. The masked guard asks his business, and Moon says, seeking rotting flesh. The pass works, the wooden door swings open, and he gets his first look inside. The Leopold underground black market fills a whole cavern with lit shop fronts. Jars of potion ingredients sit on a shelf behind dirty glass. Caged synthesis beasts stare out of the dark with glowing eyes. Moon recalls that one of the hero's future teammates was bought here as a slave. The shopkeeper in a cat mask throws both arms up at the first customer today. Moon asks for the colorless potion that drops a mage for hours. The shopkeeper laughs about rich clients and offers a referral to a slave dealer. Moon turns for the door, and the shopkeeper lunges over the counter to stop him. The shopkeeper points past a globe and asks for a moment to search the stock. Moon spots disguise magic on that face and a charm hiding the real voice. The shopkeeper bends over the bottom shelf, and Moon settles the gender question fast. He decides to befriend her tonight because the Empire is going to exile him later. Moon waits in the potion shop while the shopkeeper digs through her shelves. Moon turns his head, and one blue eye shows through the mask. Another customer steps inside, wrapped in a heavy dark cloak. She asks for a custom sedative, strong, and with no magical traces left behind. The shopkeeper says she has one and wonders why that potion is popular today. Moon reads her frame and her faint perfume and decides women have those needs too. The shopkeeper sets two matching red bottles down and says this is the one. Mixed into red wine, it turns invisible, and one drop floors an elephant. Moon's eyes blow wide open, and he asks if the elephant part is real. The customer hears the babysitting fee and passes on the free trial. The price is $130,000 a mere, and the shop never haggles. The customer flatly refuses, saying she never intended to pay in coin. Instead, she offers information, and the shopkeeper reminds her that is steep. She holds up a folded envelope and calls it worth far more than the price. The shopkeeper takes the paper and starts reading whatever is written inside. Her eyes narrow over the page, and she asks if the tip is accurate. She spreads her hands, accepts the trade, and pushes the potion across. The customer thanks her and heads for the exit with the bottle. Moon steps up with his crystal card and settles his own bill. The shopkeeper slides the card back and adds a small white bottle as a gift. She winks and explains it pairs with the red one for a better experience. Moon takes the gift and asks about the information that woman traded away. The shopkeeper leans on her counter and calls the two of them old acquaintances. She holds up a hand and names her price, and Moon guesses 90,000. 90 million, she says, still smiling behind that cat mask. Moon is already at the door, and his answer is a flat no thanks. He walks out sweating because she just flipped that tip at 9 times cost. The shopkeeper waves him off and hopes to see the young master again soon. Once the door shuts, she pulls the mask off her face without a word. The tip says the third princess will attend the Campbell ceremony tomorrow. The mansion is hiring outside staff, and she lists 2 men who hate that family. Her answer is to sell the same secret to both sides at once. The next evening, the Campbell mansion lights up and nobody inside knows yet. Moon stands with a cluster of guests near the middle of the ballroom. A marquis presents his third daughter and tells her to say hello. The girl locks up beside Moon and sweats through the whole introduction. She blurts out that her mother is calling her and bolts across the hall. The marquis apologizes for her, and Moon waves it off and offers a seat. Moon holds the smile, but one bead of sweat says he saw that coming. Every noble lady in the room watches him the exact same cold way. He sighs because the previous owner of this body left him a rotten name. His father, Duke Campbell, rests a hand on his head and says he did well. The Duke admits he worried for nothing and calls Moon tonight's main character. Moon grins wide and promises to live up to that. A voice calls for quiet, and every head turns toward the tall doorway. All anyone sees at first is white stockings under a long blue gown. The guests greet her as the pure white child blessed by the goddess of snow. Princess Celicia, the third heir of the Alapute Empire, walks into the hall. Her cold blue eyes sweep the room, and Moon still has that sleeping potion. Moen, our main guy, takes his orders from his father, the Duke. The princess is his job tonight. Moen crosses the ballroom toward the one guest his father named. That's Celicia, the princess. She greets him first, and he tells her she looks stunning tonight. Celicia thanks him for the compliment and keeps her face perfectly still. She lifts her skirt into a curtsy and says, "Praise from him is rare." Moen puts a hand on his chest and jokes that he isn't some rude noble who can't control his mouth. Celicia asks if that's really so. Moen's brain stops working right there. He offers her a room to rest in since the banquet won't start for a while. Once she's gone, Moen breathes again. She's the novel's female lead, and her presence terrifies him. Celicia walks off through the guests and thinks he felt different today. She wonders whether the new politeness is the whole reason. Nearby nobles whisper about an illegitimate daughter who recently dueled her own betrothed. One says Duke Bugle handed that girl the heir seat, and the rest hate the idea. The doors open. Ariel, the new Bugle heir, walks in with a smaller girl in a white hood. Moen watches her come. This is the real protagonist of the novel, the future Phoenix Overlord. Ariel stops on the carpet and the hooded girl stays half a step behind her. Ariel lifts a hand and asks Moen how he has been lately. Moen brightens up and starts to answer her. One of his hangers-on cuts in and screams that an illegitimate child shouldn't stand near his young master. Moen clamps a hand over the man's mouth and hauls him back. He tells the idiot to shut up. Then he smiles and tells Ariel he has been well using her full name. Ariel freezes. That is not how this boy has ever spoken to her. Either he finally grew a brain, she thinks, or he's running some kind of scheme. Moen turns to the hooded girl and asks if she's Leah. She panics that he knows her name. He tells her he could hardly forget the name of tonight's most important guest. His hand reaches toward her and Ariel smacks it away. Ariel plants herself in front of Leah and demands to know what he thinks he's doing. Leah tugs her sleeve and says her name, but Ariel isn't finished. Ariel says she only came out of respect for his father, and if he touches Leah, she'll come for him. She takes Leah's hand and pulls her off across the hall. Moen stays put. Whatever the body's old owner did to her, one polite sentence won't fix it. He decides it's fine anyway, because after tonight, their paths never cross again. His parents lead him onto the balcony above the whole crowd. Moen delivers his coming-of-age speech in front of every noble in the empire. The nobles applaud the new Campbell heir. The title might only last until sunrise. He wipes his forehead and lets the breath out. The hard part is done. The ballroom fills again, and now the actual job starts. Moen scans the crowd for one specific face. He finds Celicia alone by the window with a glass of wine. He apologizes for leaving the princess standing without any company. Then he asks whether he might have the honor of a dance. Celicia takes his hand. It's his ceremony, so she has no reason to refuse. Heads turn all around the room. Guests start asking each other what they're seeing. Leah grabs Ariel and points at the dance floor. Moen and Celicia turn together in the middle of the ballroom. Celicia says his steps are good. Moen calls himself a beginner. She tells him he has changed, and it shows in how he asked her. He asks what was wrong with it. Celicia brings up the academy ball and a viscount's daughter. Back then he ordered the poor girl to rejoice at the privilege of dancing with him. Moen goes red and insists that isn't what he meant this time. Celicia asks how her impression was. He begs her to forget the whole thing. The violins keep playing while the couple moves through the steps. Celicia brings up the marriage contract between them and starts setting limits. Moen tells her he won't overstep because the thing he wants to discuss is the engagement itself. Moon leads the princess across the ballroom and asks if their engagement needs a private talk. He tells her the king only arranged this marriage to keep her father close. Calling it off would be her decision since the decree came straight from the throne. That would damage the royal family's credibility, so the princess weighs it. She agrees that a matter this delicate stays between the two of them. Moon grins to himself. He has her, and he apologizes inside his head because the plot needs to move. Then she asks where his room is, and his eyes go blank with panic. The princess abandons the dance and heads for the exit while he stammers her title. She grips his hand and pulls him down the corridor before he can excuse himself. Two maids watch them go, and one calls him that idiot young master. The maids settle it fast. One handles it while the other keeps watch in the Lionheart King's land. Up in Moon's room, he offers wine, and the princess turns it down twice. Her body cannot handle alcohol, not even one drop, and Moon takes the news with a nod. The red potion needs a drink, and the novel never explained how to win this princess over. He asks what she wants instead. She says coffee, and the house only stocks black tea. Unavoidable circumstances, he explains with a hand on his chest. She settles for tea. Moon bolts for the door before she can change her order. She watches him leave with sparkling eyes because nobody makes tea sound this exciting. At the side table, he turns his back and sets out the cups. One drop knocks out an elephant, but she is a powerful mage, so he pours extra. The white bottle stays shut since he has no idea what is in it. The princess leans around the corner and asks if it is ready. Moon nearly drops the bottle. He answers that it is almost done while she stares from across the room. Hidden behind his own back, the red bottle empties into both cups. Sweat runs down his neck while he blocks her view of the tray. The potion leaves no magical trace, so he wipes his forehead and calls it close. Then a stain on the floor catches his eye. A red puddle sits on the carpet and he screams. Diluting that potion and selling it as a sleep aid was his first profit plan. Every drop is gone. The princess calls his name, and he shouts back that the tea is coming. The window shows only the dark sky outside. She lifts her cup and starts a polite comment about the family black tea. The liquid in her hands is deep red and faintly glowing, which black tea never does. Moon claims it is a rare Eastern Kingdom import called Big Red, then upgrades the name to Big Red Robe. The princess smiles and invites him to take the first sip, and his night gets worse. He asks whether she thinks he tampered with her drink. She calls it host etiquette. Moon raises the cup to his mouth, and one word from her stops him. Her gloved hand reaches across because his tea apparently tastes better. She offers a swap and hopes he does. Not mind. Moon manages one syllable. The princess tips the swapped cup back and drinks it down. Moon starts to say her title and stays still in his seat. Her face goes red, and the cup shakes in her grip. She gets out one word. The cup falls onto the carpet and the tea spreads through the pattern. The princess lies out cold while Moon looks down from beside the table. Drugging both cups saved him. He wonders whether the original story ran this exact scene too. He drops that thought. The Phoenix Overlord, the man coming after them, arrives once she is out, and the room has to be ready. He pulls her stockings down and considers loosening the dress. Too much skin and she catches a cold, so he only tousles her hair, then he remembers himself. Bent over the armchair, he fights his own outfit and complains that it will not come off. Shirtless at last, he stands over the mess he built on purpose. The job is done. Moon waits for the Phoenix Overlord to walk through that door. A pocket watch lies open in Moon's palm. Half an hour is gone, and nothing has happened. Moon sits shirtless on the couch and wonders where Ariel is, because the plot says she bursts in to stop him. He presses a hand to his mouth and digs back through the story he once read. In the novel, Ariel, the heroine of this world, gets her dress stained by a sick maid from the Duke's mansion. The stain sends her off to the bathroom to scrub it out, and that is when she throws the door open and catches him mid-crime. Then his eyes go wide because he knows which sick maid the plot means. The sick maid was Noel, the girl bawling under a pair of hands in his memory. Moon goes pale. No stained dress means Ariel never runs for that bathroom. The whole storyline is different now, and the princess lies beside him with her eyes shut. Her cheeks burn and her lashes lift, and Moon calls this a huge problem. He tells himself to relax, since the princess is charmed already and that still leaves an exit. Then the air turns freezing in the middle of summer, and his fist tightens. A hand clamps over his mouth from behind and pulls his head back. Ice erupts across the floor in a white blast. The hall freezes solid. She holds him locked against her inside the frost. Moon shouts for her to let him explain that it is not what it looks like. The princess only mumbles that she is burning up. Her face flushes deeper, and she says her body wants things. Moon yells that this is wrong and promises to fetch a doctor right now. Two hands strain against the ice, one clawing open, the other locked into a fist. She rolls on top of him and tells him his cold skin feels good. She kisses him, while inside his head he begs the heroine to hurry up. Over at the Duke's mansion, a gloved hand tugs at a white skirt with a brown stain on it. Ariel stands alone in the hallway, blaming a girl named Leah for dropping cake on her. Her head turns. She catches a sound behind her. The corridor stretches out empty, and she asks who is there. A maid steps out of the light and calls to her politely. The maid bows and says this wing is the Duke's forbidden area. Ariel asks what that means. The answer is a family secret nobody is allowed to share. She points at the stain and offers to take care of it herself. Green light runs over the fabric, and the word she uses is clean. Ariel is impressed. Even the servants of this house cast real spells. The maid folds the cloth away and mentions a limited pachichi cake at tonight's party. The word cake turns Ariel into a sparkling gremlin on the spot. She sprints off down the hallway, shouting thanks over her shoulder. The maid lifts a hand and tells her to take care. Then she turns around, and her eyes glow flat and red. Ariel runs and thinks that woman smelled like blood, with someone else hiding back there. She shrugs it off since the princess is grown and a top magic prodigy no bratty noble could touch. Dessert outranks everything. Ariel charges for the banquet at full speed. Back at the sealed door, a maid holds a dagger and asks if the runaway girl was a target too. Her partner kneels and burns a red rune into the carpet with one finger. They name Number 9, an agent who outranked the target by 2 realms and still ended up dead. The ward over the mansion belongs to the Lionheart King, so slipping through unseen takes real time. Both of them need to be gone before Moon or the princess walks out of that room. One of them already looked in. Moon is pinned on a frozen floor, so the killers have all night. Moon lies flat on the marble floor, gasping that it is finally over. He dodged the worst of it and kept his 30-year-old archmage cover intact. An ice blade hovers right by his cheek, and he admits the secret hardly helps now. Celicia stands over him with that sword and tells him to speak his last words. Moon grins up at her and asks if saying nothing gets him spared. The blade drops and he curls into a ball, begging for 1 second to think. His eyes go wide because he dies right here unless he calms her down fast. He gambles on modern wisdom and says a sincere love once sat in front of him. He never cherished it, and now he begs heaven for one more chance. Celicia swings and Moon shrieks with both hands thrown up. She holds the point steady and asks if that is his disgusting reason. He grins and argues it still counts as sincere since nothing actually happened. Celicia calls it a joke and says a real man would have won her openly. Moon's eye fills the panel as she admits she might have married him anyway. A tear runs down her cheek because instead he drugged her. Moon reaches out apologizing, and she orders him to shut up and kneel. Both heads snap sideways, and neither of them expected company. Celicia grips his throat and tells him to send the visitor away. Unfortunately, the walls are soundproof. She clicks her tongue, clearly out of patience. She spares him for now, telling him to dress and open up, and he agrees instantly. Dressed at the door, Moon counts the 3 endings he has left. Celicia pulls her stockings back on while he lists 3 deaths, all dead ends. He grumbles that the story's hero turns up only after the damage is done. A voice calls Master Moen through the door, and his day gets worse from here. A maid he has never seen carries in tea and pastries from the lady of the house. He points at the side table and tells her to leave the tray there. Then he stops her, sure he has never seen that face in this household. She smiles and claims she joined last night, yet no spare uniforms existed. Her green eyes go flat and she asks if that is really so. In a blink, she blurs across the room and a dark blade slices the air. Moon staggers back and realizes the strike was never aimed at him. Celicia sits with her back turned while he screams her name. The maid leaps off the floor with the dagger raised high. Dark steel crashes into a burst of ice and the whole room flashes. Moon has already yanked Celicia off the seat and they tumble together. He ends up over her, saying her name right against her face. Celicia snaps her ice sword up and catches the dagger dead on. She asks, calm as anything, whether her foolish brother hired the killer. The maid hides her employer and promises the princess dies today. Golden magic circles tear open across the hall, and a voice calls this the end. If the 3rd princess dies inside the Campbell mansion, Moon goes down with her. The great hall goes up in golden light, and a small figure dives right through the blast. The assassin comes out the other side with her knife up. A barrage that thick should pin an academy instructor. Then she hears the chant for a frost spear, and the grin drops off her face. Celicia brings the ice spear down, and the whole corridor freezes over. The blade sweeps low, and the assassin twists out from under it. Both of them come away bleeding from the cheek, and neither one steps back. Moon is already at the door, hauling on the handle. When titans swing at each other, the normal people nearby die first. His jaw drops open. The handle will not move at all. Ice shards rip past his head, so he ducks against the frame and swears. Moon presses behind the curtain and works out that the assassin jammed that lock. The novel he read never put an assassin inside the Duke's mansion. Last night he told the head maid to rest the sick staff and hire outsiders instead. His own order walked them in, one day before his coming-of-age ceremony. Someone has been watching this estate around the clock. Ice bursts over his head and he flattens himself with a yelp. Moon knows he cannot survive a fight at this level, so he wants Celicia to finish it. From the shadow, he asks himself whether Celicia winning is really a good ending. Celicia stands there glowing, easily the strongest person in the building. Moon shuts his eyes. If she dies tonight, nobody ever learns what happened here. Celicia breathes hard while the assassin praises the genius the gods picked. She points out that the gravity spell came from a second attacker in the next room. Frost crusts the assassin's cheek. She has killed prodigies before, never one like this. Celicia levels the ice sword and offers to spare her for a name. The assassin crosses both blades and says chatting is bad for her trade. Her grin widens. Sometimes the job is only about stalling for time, and that should worry everybody. She waits easy across the wrecked hall while her partner finishes a seal. The partner kneels over a golden circle and shouts that she cannot hold it much longer. The assassin takes the order and her gloved hands get to work. She raises a vial of blood taken from 100 children and calls on a molten god. Celicia recognizes the prayer at once and names it a heretical god. Black tendrils ring the assassin while Celicia's ice pushes at her from the other side. Her eye glows behind a red relic, and she orders the frost crushed. Crimson waves tear through the ice and shatter every shard hanging in the air. Celicia stumbles back with her own magic broken apart around her. Her teeth clench. She calls them blood cultists and filthy rats. The assassin agrees with the word rat very politely from across the room. Then she is already moving, closing the gap with that same grin. Celicia turns and a dark hand pulls a red ornate dagger loose. The blade opens her up, blood sprays, and the assassin howls with laughter. The assassin freezes with her mouth open, confused by what she just cut. Celicia stands there, sliced everywhere, and every single wound missed a vital spot. The assassin charges back in with a bare fist, since the ice magic is gone now. The punch lands flush on Celicia, and her head snaps hard to the side. The hit throws her through a wooden door, and the frame bursts apart. Her heels drag through her own blood across the floor. Celicia holds her ruined arm and keeps standing anyway. The assassin spins her knife and says the timing has worked out perfectly. She lunges for the neck and promises to take the head with her. Blood jumps into the air, and a white sleeve is in the way. The spray hits the assassin's face, and Celicia stares at whoever stepped in. Moon has her in his arms with his chest torn open, and she manages one word. The assassin says his name out loud. The guy whose whole plan was hiding is now the only thing standing between her and the princess. Celicia screams his name. Moen stands in front of her with the strike already in his chest. Celicia stares up at him with blood on her lip and asks why he did it. Moen coughs blood down his chin and asks himself the same question. The assassin told him their target was only Celicia. Moen looks at the open door. He was lying right by that exit. He could have crawled out and left her to bleed. His mouth is full of blood, and his hands still refuse to let go. Bare fingers clamp the blade. Sparks jump off the steel while Moen yells at Celicia to move. Celicia lies below him, cut open and pale, unable to look away. The assassin loses it and calls Moen a worthless waste of a noble. Her eyes stretch wide with rage because one spoiled kid ruined a clean kill. Moen gets half of her name out before the whole hall lights up. Celicia's blade sweeps through in one blue arc and catches the assassin square. Blood sprays from the assassin's mouth and more runs down her leg. Celicia rises with a small knife in her glove and says it is over. Moen lies flat on the marble now. Celicia presses her palm to his chest. She says the spellcaster next door got away, then asks if Moen hired them. He says no. Celicia lays out the cold math. If she had died, his treachery would have died too. Moen tells her none of that matters to him anymore. She repeats his own line back, that a man with feelings should say them openly. Moen asks if he looks like a man to her now, and calls her his princess. Celicia gives him 10 breaths of blood left and offers to carry his last words home. He turns it down. He would rather his parents keep thinking he was a disgrace. Then he changes his mind. His fingers reach her cheek and he apologizes to Celicia, and he says he really likes her. That is the whole message. His hand slips off her and drops onto the wet floor. Celicia keeps her head down and asks if one life and one apology cover what he did. Tears sit in her eyes while she shouts his full name. Blue light cracks open over his chest. She refuses the apology and orders him to live and atone. Moen wakes up floating in a black void with all the pain gone. He figures this is death. He calls it his own choice and jokes that going out for a cute girl was almost a win. Then he admits it was a total loss. He could not be the scumbag who leaves a girl dying. Black smoke curls out of the dark beside his face. Shadow claws grab him while a bar loads his sins. Envy reads 99, gluttony minus 90. A huge book drops open over his head and he demands to know what it is. The pages carry handwriting for him. Keep struggling, Moen Campbell, for this world. Moen holds the black book and asks where it was while he was actually bleeding out. A small mew answers out of the dark. Whatever made that sound is not finished with him. Down in the Campbell Mansion sewers, the water swirls and splits apart. The escaped spellcaster presses into the brick wall, furious that she got so close. She decides she should have killed Moen first, and a voice behind her says it heard the whole plan. A fire lion the size of the tunnel opens its eyes behind a cloaked man. She rips out 2 daggers and names him. The Lionheart King, Ron Campbell, is Moen's father. He asks since when the Campbell estate started inviting guests like her. Ron pulls his sword out slowly and asks what she planned to do to his son. The flame lion rears up while he promises to listen very carefully. She has nowhere to run. Moon wakes up in a giant canopy bed, and a maid already stands at the foot of it. He blinks at the ceiling, still half dead, and mumbles a question at her. The woman is Anne, his personal maid, and she offers to send for a doctor right away. Moon waves the doctor off because all he wants is the restroom. His knees fold the second his feet touch the floor. Anne catches him mid-fall and holds him upright. Moon apologizes and blames his legs for quitting on him. Anne offers him a chamber pot instead, and his whole face goes flat. She lifts a golden pot and explains that his mother trusted nobody else with him. Anne has been feeding him medicine and washing his body for days, and Moon goes pale. She leans over the bed and calmly offers to take his pants off for him. Moon covers his face and says he cannot allow that now that he is awake. He asks her to walk him to the restroom slowly, and Anne agrees to it. Moon lets out a strangled huh as the floor leaves his feet. Anne carries him down the corridor princess style because that route is faster. Two maids in the hallway turn around, one of them holding a broom pole. They watch Anne stride past with him, and one runs off to tell his mother. Moon hides his face against her shoulder and calls the whole thing embarrassing. They reach the restroom door, and he stalls with an awkward Anne. He asks her to wait outside. Anne says his mother ordered her to guard him around the clock. Moon shoves her out and grabs the handle. Anne stands alone in the corridor with nothing to say. Back in the room, she lowers him onto the bed again. Moon asks how long he was out, and the answer is 3 full days. Anne says the princess, Celicia, sent a royal physician who closed his wound that same night. Blood loss is what kept him asleep, and he asks whether Celicia said anything about him. Anne says no, and Moon lets out the longest relieved breath of his life. Then she remembers that Celicia did tell the king one thing, and Moon shoots upright. The real target that night was Celicia, and the black market paid for the attack. Duke Campbell, the head of the house, took 2 assassins alive and braced for royal fury. He came home by noon without punishment, and Anne suspects Celicia argued for them. Moon flops back on the pillow and begs her to stop pausing in the middle of sentences. Anne leans in close and asks what happened between him and the princess alone. Moon remembers Celicia in the steaming water asking for more. He panics and insists that touching a princess is an instant death sentence. Anne stays quiet, so he asks her to agree with him, and she finally does. Anne drops the subject and holds out a spoon of medicine before it gets cold. She feeds him 1 careful spoonful, and Moon actually opens his mouth for it. Moon's whole face freezes with the spoon still between his teeth. He coughs the stuff back out and yells that his tongue has gone numb. Anne says it is a blood tonic already sweetened and tells him to say, ah. Out in the corridor, the other maids hear the shouting and start to worry. One of them says he whips people every time he tastes anything bitter. They decide to report it to his mother, and Moon's head pops through the door. He raises the bowl and forbids anybody from dragging his mother into this. Then he tips the entire bowl down his throat in one go. The maids in the hall stop and turn toward the door. Moon lowers the empty bowl and stares at the door without blinking. Every drop comes straight back up, and Anne shouts for him. She holds a bucket under his chin and admits she forgot to say sip it slowly. Celicia still has not sent him one word. Moon, our yellow-haired villain, takes dose 4 from Anne, his maid. 2 more and he's healed. The taste wrecks him. He groans that it's worse than his own life. Anne pours black tea and sets down a slice of pachichi cake. Moon takes the plate and promises his mother will give her a raise. Anne leaves to report to the Duke. Our guy is already inhaling the cake. At the door, she mentions a letter from the royal palace in his cabinet. He pauses with the fork in his mouth, curious about that sender. Then he calls Anne back. She asks if the young master needs anything. Moon could eat 10 paninis unconscious. Bitter medicine is different. He asks how she got it down his throat with no feeding tube. Anne glances over her shoulder. She filled her own mouth with sugar first. The door closes. Moon nods along, glad she thought to add sugar. He stops chewing and repeats the word back to himself. Mouth? His hand jumps to his lips. Hers or his, and he needs that answer. The flashback settles it. Anne leaned in and pushed the sugared dose straight through. She waits outside the door and does not flinch at the scream. Moon giggles into the pillow, then calls himself an idiot for chasing Ariel, the novel's heroine. Then his eye snaps open. Wait a second. In a hazy memory, he sees his face pressed against a girl's. Moon shoots upright. His real first kiss already happened years ago. He picks the palace letter off the table and unfolds it. The whole thing is one line. Whoever wrote it calls him half a man. Moon drops back down, relieved that nobody is charging him for his crimes. He turns his head and smiles. The worst outcome never arrived. The madam hugs him. His father carried him in covered in blood. Moon says he is alive and well. She tells him to check a mirror. His shirt opens on a red scar. He calls it a small wound. Moon's father, the Duke, calls it a scratch, because scars are badges of honor for men. A second maid sets down a salad. Moon turns the talk to the attack. The Duke counts 3 assassins. The prince killed 1. The other 2 went to the palace in chains. 1 hangs chained in a cell. They were bounty hunters out of the Belran black market. Their god goes by the Withering King. That faction never existed in the novel. Royal intelligence calls them a syndicate. For money, they would kill their own parents. His mother says the Duke wiped the organization out in 2 days. She brags about his military merit. He calls it clearing rat nests. Moon smiles over his fork and asks who hired the hunters. Nobody knows. Every captured hunter burned up before naming an employer. With Belran gone, the king ordered every noble house investigated over Princess Celicia. Moon's face freezes. The original novel had this exact event in it. A bounty went out on the king's consort and royal knights purged the underground. The purge ran 3 months and stained the sewers red. People named it the Blood River Incident. The timing is wrong. In the novel, it happens 2 years from now. Back then, it caught Ariel in a fight at a black market auction. She survived and came out stronger, turning the Academy arc into the Savior arc. All Moon did was give Noel, another servant, 2 days off. Now the storyline is wrecked with no way to fix it. Moon, our villain stuck in someone else's novel, skips his rest and writes by candlelight. He sets the quill down. The story left the book's path, so his memorized plot is worthless. 4 goals go in the notebook. Stay alive. Dodge the 1,000 cuts ending. Get stronger. Never trust the black book. Moon chews the feather and turns it over in his head. The lunatic's voice matches nobody he has met, but he can't cross that ending off. Line 4 gets scratched out. If the 2 heroines, Ariel and Celicia, don't want him dead, then who does? Then he loses it. A few prophetic dreams give him nothing to work with. He drops flat on the bed and decides to focus on what he can actually do. Getting stronger comes first. A duke's son has training options, but all of them are too slow. The original burned a whole year at the Magic Academy and learned exactly 1 glow spell. His body is the good news. Late stage 1 is respectable for a noble kid. Warriors, mages, and priests climb 5 tiers, and Tier 5 still loses to a divine champion. Celicia got her authority from the ice goddess as a baby, so ice obeys her without prayer. Ariel is worse. Late in the novel, she carries blessings from over 10 gods. Right now, Ariel sits at his power level eating cake, except she can call gods mid-fight. Moon presses his palms together because he already knows the answer. He needs enough strength to survive Ariel, and that is his whole goal for now. Then he smirks. The assassin attack unlocked a cheat of his own. Moon snaps his fingers and calls the black book. Dark smoke tears out of the floorboards while he grins at his summon. The smoke bursts, and his chibi self giggles at how smooth that looked. The book flies out and nails him in the crotch. He folds over on the floor. Moon screams at it. If it wants him dead, fine, but that part still has a future. He wipes a tear off his cheek and gives up on arguing with furniture. The cover swings open on its own before he can stop it. The pages log his last few days down to the black market run and his failed haggling. Even Celicia pinning him down made it in. The thing reads like a smut novel starring him. His eyes go wide at one line near the bottom. In red, the book says he opens a door carelessly and gets ambushed by an assassin. Crimson light floods the room, and Moon groans that this is happening again. The pull takes him before he can finish complaining. He lands in a dim hall with his fists up asking where he is. A red circle covers the floor. This is not the old dungeon, so it may be the book's space. Up the stairs behind him, a figure with glowing eyes draws 2 daggers. Moon whips around and demands to know who is there. 2 words come out of the dark. Shadow step. The killer is already at his shoulder, swinging her blade across his neck. Blood sprays over his face before he can move a finger. She stops mid-swing with a confused noise, arms still in the air. Moon shouts 1 word as the hall goes black around him. He wakes at his desk, holding his throat. That woman killed him in 1 hit. Moon stands over the black book and asks why an assassin was living inside it. A status screen answers, Warrior first tier, Mage first tier, Cleric none, with dagger combat and shadow step logged at level 0. He grins because dying in there pays him in skill points, and his cheat is about to go off the charts. Night covers the Campbell Ducal estate, its towers dark under a cold sky. Inside, Moon sprawls on his bed, sweating and gasping that he made it out. He holds up a pocket watch. Time runs the same in there, yet he lasted only 3 seconds. Blood dries on his sleeve while he opens the black book to check his proficiency. The status screen reads First Tier, Warrior, and Mage, with dagger combat barely past 1%. Moon grins because the book records enemy skills and lets him farm them off their shadows, tuition-free. The memory replays the assassin's legs blurring through that swift footwork. The assassin herself steps into the memory with her dagger, calm and precise. Back on the pillow, he laughs that every skill will be his soon. He slams the black book to his chest and dives straight back into training. The shadow assassin opens him up on the first exchange and he howls. Her blade rips across him again, blood everywhere, and he drops. She stands over him with red eyes and his curse gets cut in half. A maid stops outside his room with a tray and calls for the young master. She walks in with his medicine and says it is time to take it. All she finds is a lump of blanket mumbling on the mattress. The maid smiles and says he still sleeps like he did as a little kid. She presses a hand to her chest and calls him too adorable. She leaves the bowl under thermal preservation magic so it stays warm. The door closes and the quiet room keeps that blanket twitching. Moon explodes out of the covers with a yell. His eyes bug out because the assassin has been kicking him in the crotch. He grinds his teeth at a woman stronger than him who fights dirty. Then he throws himself back under, refusing to believe he cannot catch her once. The castle stands bright in the morning sun. After 185 runs, Moon lasted 30 seconds. One more attempt, and he takes a hit that arches his whole back. His hand smacks the side table and knocks the medicine bowl onto the floor. Moon slides off the mattress and lands on the marble. He lies there panting, hair soaked, completely spent. His eyes open, and he says he managed to stabilize at last. Daylight fills the window while he explains that the illusion never kills, but the pain of dying is real. He slumps against the bed frame and counts nearly 200 deaths that almost finished him for good. He pushes himself upright with a hand on his chest, still smiling. Moon opens the book to collect what the night bought him. Dagger combat now reads level 2, and shadow step reached level 1. He hugs the cover and cries, still far below the assassin, but past the wall. Out in the hallway, he drops into a stance, way too eager to test it. Shadow step fires, and his body smears into a dark streak. He reappears down the corridor, stunned that the move actually worked. Moon punches the air and shouts that he did it. 1 second later, he winces because his foot is destroyed. He hits the floor screaming and asks how that assassin fought Celicia, the novel's heroine, so calmly. Against the wall, he works it out. His rank is too low, since martial skills need battle aura from second-rank fighters. He sits down with the book and admits the plan needs a teacher. His hand reaches for the quill. St. Maria Academy opens soon, but its instructors are all mages. Moon scratches his head because magic is so convenient here that almost nobody trains martial arts. Then his eyes light up over the original story's strongest fighter, the man who wiped out armies alone. A gray-haired man picks at his breakfast, and that legend lives in Moon's own house. The Empire's greatest warrior of the past century climbs the palace stairs. 2 nobles bow to him because by 25, he ran the whole border army. The crown calls him the Lionheart King, and Moen, our main guy, calls him Dad. Our guy sits up in bed, thrilled that he owns a treasure mountain of a father. The academy can wait now since he plans to stay home and train under Dad. A maid asks if the young master is awake, and he turns toward the door. Anne, his personal maid, tells him that his father is asking for him. He pulls her along by the arm because he has a question for Dad, too. 2 junior maids spot the pair, and one of them blurts out Big Sis Anne. She corrects herself to head maid, and Anne waves them back to work. Moen leans in and asks when exactly Anne got promoted. The old head maid resigned, so the Duke handed the post to Anne. Moen rubs his hair, sure his own orders drove that woman away. Anne tells him to drop the guilt since the woman never left the household. His mother storms in for a hug and calls him her dear. She squeezes his cheek until he agrees to say mom instead of mother. She pushes his head down toward her stomach while he asks what he should feel. The kid presses his cheek to her belly, and Mom says a sibling is coming. He asks if it is real, and she says the royal doctor already checked. His father listens while Moen answers that a brother or a sister both work. Mom hugs him again, and the Duke tells them to calm down and sit. The family settles into the garden pavilion under a bright sky. Moen jumps up and yells that his father is heading back to the front line. The Duke confirms it, and most of the maids ride out with him this afternoon. Faye, the family's former head maid, promises to take good care of his wife. Moen begs him to stay, since other generals could lead that army instead. The Duke says the Abyss demons started moving after 10 quiet years. Moen freezes because the original book called that invasion a fake. The real attack comes 3 years later, when the novel's heroine fights the demons. His mouth hangs open because 3 years without dad wrecks everything. A giant crap fills the panel while his stay-at-home plan dies on the spot. He spills tea over his own hand and keeps smiling with dead eyes. A huge, shaggy beast crouches in the square while the carriage waits behind. Moen sulks with a black cloud over him as Mom teases her little crybaby. His father calls him son, and Moen answers with a flat The Duke grips his shoulder and says saving the prince proved real courage. The golden crest shows a sword above a dragon, the Empire's sharpest blade. One day, another Campbell picks his own battlefield, his father says. Moen goes quiet after Dad calls him an adult with resources ready. Dad grins and jumps straight to business, which throws Moen off completely. Anne waits by the rail while Moen admits he likes her well enough. The Duke says her contract ends in a year, so his son should move fast. Mom just smiles as Moen protests that the Princess Celicia is his fiancée. His eyes go wide when Dad calls that engagement a political arrangement. The Duke would let the princess run the house, and he ends it with a family order that turns Moen's own maid into a wedding mission. A carriage rolls off down the road while a winged beast circles above it. Moon and his maid Anne watch it go, and she asks why her name came up with his father. Moon pats her head and says it is nothing he can't say out loud. He explains that his father wants them set up, with kids to carry the Campbell name. Then he laughs it off and calls her the most capable maid in the family. He promises to fund her way out with a dowry if she ever likes someone. His hand rests on her shoulder while he tells her to chase her own happiness. Moon grins to himself, sure his years of novel reading just moved her to tears. Behind him, Anne walks off silently. Her face goes dark as she repeats the part about leaving the family. Her fists clench hard enough to draw blood, and she says her young master has really changed. Anne turns away in the dark with one red eye glowing and tells herself tonight is the night. He still has no idea. Late that night, the library is still lit, and Moon complains that plans change fast. He sits behind a stack of books because with his father gone, he has to train himself. The black book floats up beside him while he plans to simulate assassin fights. His palm presses a red volume he has barely started, only the introduction so far. Moon lifts the black book over his head to double-check what it swallowed. He opens the covers and dark smoke leaks out around the pages. The page already stores fishbone lockpicking and imperial soldier training. The book calls him baby and says the useless comment meant nothing, so he hugs it to his chest. He nuzzles the cover while Anne appears in the doorway with a tray. Anne asks if the young master is still reading, and he greets her by name. Moon smiles and asks whether she brought him late-night snacks. He notes only she and Noel are left running the mansion, so she must be tired. Anne holds up a rare red wine from Count Locke, worth 20,000 Amer a bottle. Moon waves the wine off because reading plus alcohol will just put him to sleep. The bottle goes back down and Anne offers him anything else instead. He asks for coffee, but she pours red tea and says nothing else is left tonight. Moon chews his fork and mutters that the excuse sounds oddly familiar. A question mark pops over his head while he tries to place where he heard it. Anne explains rats chewed open the coffee beans, so he takes the tea. He drinks it down and hums, happy with the taste. His sight blurs and the room warps into cold blue light. The cup slips from his fingers and the tea splashes across the floorboards. Anne leans over him, perfectly calm, while he says her name. Moon drops flat on the boards and asks why she betrayed him. She gathers him against her and swears she will never betray him. Her face lowers to his ear and she tells him to sleep well now. Moon's eyes snap open in the dark, wide and darting. He is stripped to the waist and soaked in sweat. His wrist sits strapped to the wood under a thick black band. Both ankles are locked the same way, and he recalls the person the prophecy named. Anne sits over him, pleased that the black market medicine worked. Moon's face goes white and he demands to know what she is doing. Back when he was 8, she came to his side, so now he belongs to her in return. She calls it fixing her broken young master. Moon shouts that he has no idea what path she means and begs her to let him go. Her palm clamps over his mouth, and she says it is far too late for talking. Anne presses a finger to her lips and says that after tonight, flesh and soul, he is hers. She leans down and repeats that every part will belong to her. He spent the afternoon offering her freedom, and now he is tied down. Moon opens his eyes in the dark, wrecked and barely awake. He says 30 years as a grand mage were never meant to end like this. The maid resting beside him is Anne, and she was behind all of it. Anne touches her lips and admits the first time still hurt a little. Moon tells her she does not have to force herself for his sake. Her finger presses on his mouth, and she answers with a flat no. For Anne, that pain is nothing next to the endless years she waited. She leans into his cheek and says she raised him into a hated young master on purpose. It was all so he would belong to her alone, and his jaw drops. Moon remembers the Black Book prophecy where Anne kills him in the end. He grits his teeth and pulls against the shackle locked on his wrist. Anne's voice comes from behind him and his eye goes wide. She asks what he is doing, so he blames a sore arm from the bindings. Anne notices it is already noon and decides she cannot stay any longer. She pulls her gloves on because the Duke's estate still needs her. Then she offers to clean out everyone living at that estate for him. Moon screams the words back at her with his eyes fully round. Anne tilts her head, and he begs her to drop that idea completely. She leans over him and asks if he prefers Noel, another maid there. Moon denies it fast, since one wrong answer gets that girl killed. Anne covers her mouth and laughs, saying she was only teasing him. He pushes his luck and asks her to take the shackles off him. Anne agrees on the spot, and a spark jumps off her fingertips. The cuff on his wrist snaps open by itself without any key. The iron on his ankle pops loose too, and his leg drops free. Moon covers his chest while she warns him the room is sealed steel. Anne told the maids he left for the academy so nobody will look for him. She presses his hand to her cheek and promises to bring his meals herself. Her glove slides down his chest, and this goodbye is taking a while. Moon turns bright red because she is clearly starting again. Anne stops herself and says she really has to leave now. At the door, she tells him to rest well while she is away. Moon yells after her to at least leave him his clothes. The heavy door swings shut and the latch clicks into place. Alone now, he rubs his head over 100 wrong guesses about the prophecy. Freedom matters more to him, and nights like that would finish him off. Moon walks up to the door and decides to test it himself. Both feet slam into the steel plating with everything he has. The steel holds, and his shoulder takes the entire hit instead. He curls up on the stone floor, howling that it hurts. Even the walls behind it are steel, so his cheat book looks useless. He lies flat with his cheek down and gives up for a moment. The Black Book drifts in on dark flames, and Moon tells it to back off. Anne's metal control is divine level, close to Celicia, so training comes too late. He sighs, opens one eye, and looks at the floating book again. Fine, he will train, since dying inside beats rotting in this cell. Then his hand stops on the old brown book he spotted last night. Moon grins over the open pages and calls them his formula for victory. Moon is face down in a dark cell, grinding out push-ups past 198. He hits 200 and drops, soaked through with sweat. He sits up, huffing. The Black Book only trains his technique, so muscle has to come the slow way. Then he throws a full chibi tantrum, swearing nobody pins him down again. A voice behind him says his energy puts her mind at ease, and he turns around. Anne, his maid, floats a covered tray in on pink magic. Her work is finally done. She hides a grin and says he greeted her like a wife welcoming her husband. The water is already drawn and warm, plus his supper and his herbal tonic. Then she tugs her collar and offers herself as the first course. Moon screams bath and dives for the tub before she finishes talking. He floats there flat-faced, muttering that Anne is a menace. Anne kneels behind him and soaps his chest. He insists he can wash alone. She presses cheek to cheek and asks why he is pushing her away already. Her hands keep working. Every inch of him is hers to clean. Then she licks his face and he swears the reaction is completely normal. She pulls her hand back and agrees to stop teasing him. Anne lifts a plate of dark meat instead and offers to feed him. The fork comes at his mouth with a thick chunk on it. One bite, and his eyes turn into sparkles. He says his parents never served beef this tender with no rubbery edges. Anne praises the guess and says she usually cooks these into soup. Moon keeps chewing and wonders aloud if it is tenderloin or neck. Anne smiles in the shadow and says it's bull penis. The meat falls out of his mouth while he repeats the words. She adds that the animal was a Magritha giant, famously well endowed. A glowing bull fills his head. Lonely males bore holes in trees, hence the name. Moon empties his stomach into a bin while Anne lists worse creatures she has cooked. He begs her to stop, and she admits she has been slipping this into his food for years. Moon shoots up out of the bathwater, finally done playing along. Anne stays kneeling, perfectly calm while he yells about being locked in this hellhole. He leans over the edge, fist shaking, and threatens her if she keeps him here. Then his eyes glaze over mid-sentence and his voice dies. One drop in the tonic was enough. Anne catches him and holds him upright. Real freedom would mean losing him, she says, so he should sleep and leave it to her. The castle sits quiet on the hillside, lit up against the night sky. Morning comes, and Moon wakes up groaning in a wide bed. Anne sits on the edge with her back turned, hooking her bra. She straightens her uniform and says she held back to only twice today. Moon lies there and answers with one flat humph. She asks whether he is still angry, then offers him a tiny little wish. Moon lifts his head, suspicious of the word tiny. He asks for freedom and gets a flat no. Clothes get the same answer. Moon explodes about how tiny this wish really is. Anne taps her chin and thinks, her big gift is letting him pick his own lunch and supper every day. After tonight, that might be the most dangerous power in the Empire. Anne, his head maid, stands over the cell bed and asks the young master what he actually wants. Moon fakes a cough into his fist and mentions that autumn is nearly here. He remembers the boat on Lake Baipor, red wine in hand, maple leaves drifting over fresh fish. Anne puts a finger to her lips and works out that he wants Baipor fish. The lake is far. She watches him sniffle and sigh over the memory. Moon throws one arm up and moans about rotting in a cell after a year of elegance. He pushes his face into the sheet and says he might as well waste away without that fish. The sheet drops just far enough to show a smug little grin. Anne only sighs his title. She shuts her eyes and tells him she understands. Their hands lock together while Anne swears she will bring back fresh Baipor fish. Moon asks if she means it. He winks and calls her the best head maid alive. Anne claps a hand over her mouth, cheeks glowing red. Their eyes fill the whole frame as she leans in. She leans the rest of the way in and kisses him. Her glove presses into his shoulder and stays there. Then Anne steps back and walks off. Moon calls her name, completely lost. At the door, she says she returns before noon. Moon manages a shaky okay. Out in the corridor, Anne admits she nearly lost control in that cell. She covers her mouth again and decides to hurry, so there is more time to spoil him later. Back on the bed, Moon stretches out, extremely pleased with himself. He lifts the black book and asks for other training simulations besides that cult assassin. The book flips open and answers yes. Moon orders a trial of 1,000 locks, built before Anne gets home. He has no idea what woke up in that lake. Lightning tears over a flooded road at the Lake Baipor border. A guard blocks a woman with a blue umbrella and tells her nobody goes closer. She just asks why. His hand closes on her arm to push her back down the road. Under the hood, her one visible eye lights up red. Black spikes punch through his palm and blood sprays into the rain. Anne warns him in the storm that only the young master touches her next time she feeds him to the fish. The guard cradles his ruined hand and curses her while she asks what happened at the lake. He spits it out. The lake master of Baipor woke up and the guild sent a B-rank team after it. Anne walks past and blames the freak weather on that beast. The guard demands 300 emails for his wound. A coin pouch drops into the mud by his boots and he barks at her back. He shouts that she is still going and she answers, of course. Then he asks what makes her this obsessed. Anne keeps walking under her umbrella while the guard throws one more question. She glances back, smiles under the mask, and says it is for love. At the lake, Iluka, the team's healer, grips her staff and tells herself this is the moment. The name in her head is Rod, the swordsman, and she fears another woman takes him first. A shout from the fight snaps Iluka back out of her daydream. Rod braces behind his blade and screams for healing before he drops. Green light pours out of Iluka while she calls on the spirit of life. Rod grins that the thing is finally rising, and their third member warns that it is coming. The lake erupts in a tower of water and shattered stone. A white maw breaks the surface with red eyes burning. The lake master of Baipor is awake, and Anne is walking straight toward it. A lake beast rises out of the storm with its jaws open and water spinning around it. The party's shield caster answers with a gold wall and yells blessing of the earth. The water slams into that light and the whole shoreline goes white. He holds the wall up and screams for the mage to fire right now. Tia, the party's ice mage, grips her staff and stammers that she is ready. She calls on the frost spirits and the rain freezes into shards around her. Her eyes go wide and every shard turns on the monster at once. The blast tears across its head and swallows the whole face in fire. Iluka, the group's healer, shouts that this is the opening they wanted. Rod, their swordsman, drops in with his blade wrapped in flame. The cut goes straight through and fire bursts out of the wound. He drags the burning sword down through the last of the ice. Rod lands hard and pants, using the blade to hold himself upright. He turns around in the rain with a grin and a thumbs up. It is over. Iluka praises Tia for that shot and asks if she came out okay. Tia says she is fine and thanks him for stepping in when he did. Her cheeks go red while Rod tells her the team is lucky to have her. As kids, the two of them swore to become the strongest duo alive. Rod grins in the rain while Iluka reaches for the bloodied glove between them. Tia cries because he gave his heart to another girl and she never made his story. Iluka holds a green healing glow over that hand while Rod leans in close. Tia wipes her face and goes to help carve up the giant fish, and that is when the night turns. Her eyes snap wide because the water behind them is moving again. Rod turns toward the noise, and Iluka says that sound is impossible. Rings spread across the black surface of the lake wider and wider. A wall of water rips upward and cuts the shoreline in half. Rod pulls Iluka in and holds her, telling her this cannot be happening. A second lake master rises out of the dark with a red spike on its back. Smoke rolls over the water where the first monster went down. A red magic circle flares open and an explosive spell fires into its face. The blast bursts against its eye and the beast does not even flinch. Red lightning crawls across its body because this one casts magic too. The shards blow outward and shred the ground under the party. That hit throws Rod and Tia across the wet rocks in one tangle. Rod coughs and tells Iluka to run because this thing is far out of their league. Iluka is down in the mud, cut open, and she asks what happens to him. Rod says he pulled Tia into this team, so keeping her alive is his job even if it kills him. Tia hears every word of it and finally starts crying. She breaks away and runs, and Rod screams her name across the ruins. A new voice cuts in, names the thing the Lake Master of Baypor, and calls it a true apex beast. A swordswoman with a blade on her back looks up at the monster and says, "A Lord-class beast is nothing. Fetching a dragon whip for her young master will not take long at all." Red lightning pools over the Lake Master's open jaws. Rod is flat on the wet rocks under those teeth, and all he manages is damn it. He shuts his eyes, pulls Tia to his chest, and braces for the bite. Anne steps into the rain behind them, lifts one hand, and says bind. The jaws never close. A gold pillar catches the strike in midair. Embers drift over Rod's face while the blast burns out. He opens his eyes and starts asking what he is even looking at. The Lake Master towers over the water, red cracks glowing on its skull. Iluka stares up from the mud because that attack should have flattened them. A pale hand reaches down and asks if she is hurt. Iluka asks who she is. Anne looks back over her shoulder and says she will kill the thing, so stay safe. Anne throws her hand out and orders it imprisoned. Black iron flows around Iluka in ribbons. She says the metal went liquid. Iron spikes clamp the beast's head while red light leaks through its teeth. Anne tells it that its screaming chased off the fish she caught for her young master. A wall of iron curls over the lake, and she names the price of that sin. Rain runs down her face while she promises it will pay with its life. One red slash rips across the dark, Anne tiny inside her own attack. The skull splits, blood sprays, ice bursts up underneath. Rod sits up in the shallows, stunned that the Lake Master of Baypor is dead. Iluka shouts his name, and Rod tells her he is fine. He lifts Tia to his shoulder, says she took a bad hit, and pulls out a potion. Rod asks Iluka to handle one job, and she repeats it back, confused. He wants her to recruit the woman who one-shot a Lord-class beast for bigger bounties. Anne crouches by the water with two fish, unsure which kind he asked for. She sighs that not knowing his favorite makes her a failed maid. Iluka cuts in. Both of those are useless, Iluka says. The crimson one stinks. The rainbow is poison. Iluka grew up across the lake, so Anne asks her for the recipe. 10 minutes later, the whole method is in Anne's notebook, ginger slices included. Iluka goes pink and asks if the fish are for someone she loves. Anne says they are. Anne goes quiet and hums to herself. A foggy image of her young master comes to her, lucky once he learns how deep her love runs. Anne lifts a metal bucket of fish and says she should get going. Iluka calls her back because she has a small question about love. She presses a hand to her cheek and asks to confide in someone mature. Anne sets the bucket down. Matters of the heart are the unsolvable ones. She offers advice from her own experience, payback for the cooking lesson. Iluka starts with the oldest opening there is. She has this friend. The friend has liked a dense guy for years, and he is gentle with everyone. Anne asks if he is the fireplace type. Another woman arrived before any confession. He treats the new girl better, so the childhood friend thinks about quitting. Anne leans in, eyes closed, and asks how much Iluka loves that man. Iluka panics and insists it is not her, it is her friend. She covers her face and folds. More than 10 years since they were kids. Anne asks if she would die for him. Of course, and past that, even things the world rejects. Anne pulls her hood up and says she already has her answer. Iluka blinks. Anne asks why she needs a stranger when her love runs that deep. Anne walks off, telling her to give everything and never pick a choice she will regret. The scariest woman on this lake just gave a lovesick girl permission for anything. Iluka stands out in the freezing dark and watches a cloaked figure walk away. Tears sit in her eyes while she thinks about following what her heart wants. Iluka is flat on the ground now, sweating, barely able to lift her head. A robe of burning red hangs over her, and she gets out a single word. Tia and Rod lean in above her, scratched up from the fight, calling her name. The voice asks what she truly wants, and she admits she can't let Rod go to anyone else. One of her eyes turns red. She says she wants Tia dead. The voice tells her to conquer Rod and etch her mark into him. Iluka asks how, since Rod is strong. The voice says any man breaks under a collar. A burning core lights up inside her chest, and the power is hers. Back on the hill, the other two ask what happened, and she blames her magic running dry. Iluka says she asked the maid to join them, but the woman serves a noble house. Rod wanted to thank her in person, since without her they might not have walked away. Tia cuts herself off and stares at Iluka's chest. A red brand glows right through the front of her cloak. Iluka covers it, blames the Lake Master's lightning, and pushes everyone to head back. Rod suddenly scoops Tia off her feet, and she demands to know what he is doing. He tells her she is light enough to carry all day. Tia snaps that weight is not the point. Iluka hangs back and watches the pair walk on ahead of her. In the shadows, her eyes glow red and she smiles, and Rod has no clue what is coming. At noon the next day, sunlight sits over Duke Campbell's estate. Down in the dungeon, Moon lifts his head off the pillow at a voice by the door. Anne steps in with a covered silver tray. Moon bursts into tears and yells that he nearly died waiting for her. Anne asks if he is finally ready to hand himself over, body and soul. She lifts the lid on two fish she hauled back from Lake Baikal, grilled and steamed. Moon's eyes go full star mode, and he picks the steamed one first. Anne lifts a strip of the fish onto a spoon. She holds it up and tells him to open wide. Moon takes the bite with his eyes shut. He says it is actually good and offers her a taste. Anne says the plate is all his and warns about tiny bones. Moon says he is not a kid. Anne stands there holding the plate while Moon goes very quiet. Moon grabs his throat. A bone is stuck, and Anne says there is no helping it. She pushes him flat onto the bed and tells him she wants to kiss him. Her plan is to pinch his nose and suck the bone out with her lungs. Moon panics and asks whether she is being serious right now. Anne climbs over him and pins him down on the mattress. He starts yelling about where her hand went, and the sentence never finishes. Moon, our main guy, twists his hands into the bedsheets and groans. His maid Anne has her mouth on his, and she is definitely not asking first. She pulls away, and he begs her to warn him before she pounces on him next time. Anne leans in with a grin and tells him the fish bone is right there. Moon thanks her, then asks for the plate so he can eat it without choking. He shovels the fish down himself, one spoonful after another. Anne watches him clean the plate, wearing a soft little smile. Moon flops back and calls the dish the finest food in the whole empire. Anne collects the empty plate and asks if it is time for that. Moon blinks and asks what exactly she means. She loosens her uniform. Lord Lorne, the man she answers to, ordered her to give the Campbell family a child. Moon panics and yells at her to hold on, but a gloved hand pins his shoulder. Anne asks if a whole week of this has already made him tired of her, and he swears that is not it. Moon covers his mouth and claims exercise after a meal is unhealthy, and that tired parents make a weak baby. Anne melts and asks if her young master worries about her well-being. He says, yeah, sure, let's go with that. She agrees to tonight, then adds one more thing she has to report. On her way back, she passed through Sevatheus, the city that dresses the royal family. Anne bought an outfit made of glossy black stockings, shiny and one piece. Moon guesses a bunny girl. The suit shows up in his head, shiny legs and all. Chibi Moon freezes with his mouth open and cannot get a single word out. He covers his face and denies everything, since a proper gentleman would never like stockings. Anne says she has tidied his locked cabinet for years, and the novels with black stockings outnumber the rest. She lifts her skirt and points out that she has worn nothing but black around him since he was little. Moon looks away and mutters that he thought that was just her taste. Chibi Moon throws both fists up and admits he loves black stockings. Anne laughs behind her hand and calls an honest young master too cute. She heads out to catch up on her chores and tells him to wait for tonight. The door shuts, pink magic crawling across the lock. Moon's goofy act drops the second she is gone. He opens his palm. A thin fishbone rests there, the whole reason he wanted that plate. The black book puts it near 3, and Anne finishes her duties at 6, so he has 3 hours. Moon creeps to the door with the sheet still wrapped around his waist. He slides the bone into the keyhole and turns it with 2 fingers. His eyes narrow, and he fires off his max-level fishbone lockpick skill. Inside the skill vision, he stands in a white uniform and swears out loud. 12 giant lock cores hang above him, each one taller than a house. Moon hits the stone floor flat on his back and curses the lock. He sits up sweating and counts them one more time. 12 cores. Every pin has to be pushed to the exact key position, or all of them reset. Fishbones are brittle, and one pin springing back snaps his only key. He crouches over the leftovers. Only 4 bones are long and tough enough. The real problem is worse. A snapped bone stuck in the lock. Anne finds it, and the trick dies forever. Moon gets 1 shot at this cage. Moon is still crouched at the cell door in a bedsheet, working the lock with a fishbone. The bone gives out mid-turn, and every pin drops back to the start. His eye goes wide in the dark. Another attempt just burned for nothing. Moon throws his arms up and howls that only 3 cores were left. He drops flat on his back and wishes the lockmaker a long and prosperous life. He pulls a hand through his hair and calls up the black book. The page shows 5:30. Anne brings food in about an hour. 1 usable bone is left on the floor. After that, he has no tools at all. Moon says he already knows the feel of the first 10 cores, so this run should land. He seats the bone in the keyhole and fires the fishbone lockpick at full power. Up in the kitchen, Anne works the stove with Noel, another maid on staff. A pot of fish soup steams on the counter while Noel tastes a bowl. Noel squeals with her eyes shut and calls it the best fish soup of her life. Anne ladles out more and says the help put them an hour ahead of schedule. Anne goes quiet as Noel brings up the new recipes she tests while the family is away. 2 cleavers on the table start glowing pink while Noel mentions the packed away portions. Noel raises a finger and announces she has solved the whole mystery. She guesses Anne keeps a secret cat in the mansion. Anne answers with silence. Noel adds that Moon hates fur, so this house has never kept cats or dogs. Anne smiles a little while Noel calls it a tiny break of the rules. Anne lifts a finger to her lips and asks Noel to keep the secret. Noel agrees on the spot and asks to come along and meet the cat. Anne turns her down gently, saying the little one is shy around strangers. She carries the tray down the dark stairs, glad it never came to hiding a maid's body. Pink lightning crawls over her on the steps. Noel's words stayed with her. Down below, Moon sweats over the cores with the last bone shaking in his fingers. Anne folds her hands and counts. A baby would still be 10 months away. Moon's teeth clench at the lock while Anne decides a pet would ease his boredom. She touches her collar and pictures golden fur like his, or black like hers. Anne settles on asking him about it directly, smiling to herself. Her red eye snaps open. The tray lid hits the stone floor. Anne stands in the open cell doorway with her back to us. The cell is empty. Moon is already wading the sewer, stunned that his cell sat under the drains. His arm scrapes a broken board and the splinter opens his skin. He shoves at the piled junk and can barely move in the pitch black. Moon remembers a spell and judges himself far enough from the cell to risk it. A ball of light blooms in his palm and lights the tunnel around him. He grins and admits the illumination spell is handier than expected. Moon's smile dies. He whips around toward the black end of the passage. His eye blows wide. He ran this far, and it still was not far enough. Anne walks the flooded tunnel with dark tendrils spreading around her. She steps into the light with her red eyes glowing and tells Moon she found her young master. His escape lasted about 10 minutes. Anne, the family maid, walks out of the dark and says she found him. Moon spins around, soaked in sweat, and shouts her name. He runs. He just broke out of that cage and refuses to die down here. Moon grits his teeth and tells her not to underestimate him. He fires off Shadow Step and blue light rips along his arm. Anne says one word, command, and every blade around her wakes up. Dark blades cut through the air in a wide spread. They smash the corridor apart while Moon dives clear of them. Anne watches the dust settle and her red eyes never blink. A broken table crashes straight down onto the spot she is standing on. She twists through the falling wreckage without slowing down. Her heels land in the shallow water and she keeps walking. Anne stands alone in the wreckage with no Moon in sight. She asks if he picked up that speed magic at St. Mary's. She thought every exit was locked and he still slipped out. Behind a gap in the boards, one blue eye is watching her. Anne offers a deal, walk back to her now, and she forgets all of it. Then her arm swings and blades gut a pile of broken wood. She guessed wrong, and Moon stares at the blades, still sweating. For a second, he decides that getting locked up again sounds fine. Anne stops and reads the air currents for any movement. Nothing shifts, so she walks deeper into the flooded hall. 10 minutes later, the ruined room sits quiet. And that quiet is bait. Moon breathes out and admits his heart nearly quit on him. His hand reaches for the door handle while she is outside. One red eye stares back through the boards. She never left. Anne stands in the dark and points, shadows spreading behind her. She lowers her knife and blames it all on her imagination. Anne hurries away. If Noel and the household hear about this, she is finished. Moon sits there blank and dazed, and a small blue spirit drifts up beside him. The black book floats over his head with sparks flying off it. He yells out loud and scrambles backward across the floor. Moon freezes. Anne doubled back, and now she knows where he is. He grabs the black book and decides to gamble everything on one run. Blue magic tears open the dark as he bolts for the exit. Moon shoves a heavy metal shutter up with both hands. Rain hits his face. The way out is finally standing wide open. He whispers that he made it with tears in his eyes. Arms spread in the storm, he shouts that he really did it. Moon slaps a hand over his mouth before Anne can hear him. He runs for the capital before that black book prophecy catches up with him.